So we're going to be thinking once more about the Easter story and important characters within the Easter narrative. Now, before we get started, I want you to try and check your memory. How good at you are remembering what it is that we've already learned. Now, we found out about Judas and we found out about Peter. Now, the question is, what do we know about them? What happened? What did they do? What did they think? What actions did they put into place? Have a little think about Peter and Judas and chat to the people around you. So today we're going to be thinking about the women in the story. Now, you might be sitting there going, I don't think I know about many women in the story of Easter. Well, that's because in biblical times, it was not really heard of to have many accounts of women. In fact, women and children were not thought of as important, and so it was only men that were not normally written about. So the fact that we've actually got a piece of information about them within the Bible, well, that's incredible. That tells us that they were truly significant. So we're going to be focusing in, a bit like our magnifying glass, and zooming in within the story of Easter and thinking about different women within the Bible. Now, you might know the names of some of them. You might know obviously the name of Mary, the mother of Jesus. But be careful, there are many Marys in the Bible. There's Mary, the mother of Jesus. There's also Mary Magdalene, that means she came from Magdala. There was also another Mary, Mary the wife of Clopas, and there was another Mary, Mary the mother of James the Younger. We've also got Salome and we have Joanna. That's just a few of the names that we know already of the women who went around with Jesus. So when we talk about the disciples, when we talk about the friends of Jesus, it can be quite easy to just think about all the men like Peter, James, John, Andrew, Thomas, Judas. We can think about all those, and they were a group of men that went around with Jesus. But there was a wider group that all travelled at the same time, and that included those women. And the women were really important. They looked after Jesus and the disciples. They would do the cooking, they do the preparing. They also had lots of money to help support the whole of the group. So the women were really key people as part of Jesus' disciples as he travelled across the land. And the group of women we're going to be thinking about today had travelled with Jesus for many years, had been with him, had seen the miracles, had listened to his teaching, and had been from place to place with him. And today we're going to think about their role within the Easter story, how they were involved, what they witnessed, what they saw, and what they were part of. So let's take a little look. Let's go back in time and find out what happened with some of the women during Jesus and the Easter story. We were there with Jesus every step of the way. And on that supper night when we were clearing away after the Passover meal, after sharing bread and wine together, Jesus went out to pray. And that's when we heard the feet of marching soldiers going past below us, down the street and up to the place where Jesus was, the Garden of Gethsemane. And we heard that Jesus had been arrested. When all the other disciples came running in, they told us what had happened. How Judas had come up to Jesus and kissed him on a cheek. And how the guards had tied Jesus up and led him away. We followed and tried to find where Jesus was. And then we heard the trial. We saw how the rulers tried to find out what it was that Jesus had done wrong. And time again, they asked Jesus and they took witnesses from different people. But none of them made sense. There was no reason why Jesus should have been arrested, and certainly why he shouldn't have been crucified. And then he was told that that was it. We saw Pilate wash his hands and say that Jesus was to be handed over. We were in that crowd. We were in amongst all those people, and people were shouting and cheering and saying that Jesus deserved death. He's only ever been loving and kind. He's never tried to hurt anyone. And then right there as he walked in front of us carrying the most enormous cross, he fell down underneath the weight of everything. And we just couldn't stop crying. There he was in front of us. One of the guards made a man come out from the crowd and pick up Jesus' cross. And as Jesus got up, he saw myself and the other women and the tears rolling down our faces, and told us not to cry. Even then, don't cry for me, he said. Cry for yourselves and your children. And then he was led up the hill and placed on the cross, and more jeers and more taunts and more things being yelled out to him. And Jesus just hung there. And then one of the people to the side of him, a thief who was on the cross, started yelling out too. But the other thief on the other side, he said that we deserve to die, he and the person on the cross. But Jesus didn't. And then Jesus turned to him and said that he would be with Jesus in paradise. And then the sky grew dark, almost like nighttime. And as we stood, we saw Jesus. And then he asked God to forgive each and every person there. And with a final breath, he cried out, "It is finished." And then he died. We looked on from the distance. We looked at Mary, his mother, and how Jesus, before he had died, had told John to look after her, and how she was weeping too. We followed Jesus' body as it was taken down from the cross, wrapped in cloths, and laid in a tomb, a brand new tomb made out of stone, and the most enormous rock was placed in front of it. And it was sealed, and the guards were placed so that no one could get in. And we saw where his body was laid. We saw where Jesus was placed. But because it was the day before the Sabbath, and because it was late at night, we could not anoint him. And so we're here now, waiting for the sun to rise tomorrow, waiting to be able to go to that tomb and to place our oils and our spices on his body as our last gift to him. For he rests in that tomb now. And we have been with him every step of the way. But what do we do now that he's gone? So we found out there, didn't we, that there were some women who were with Jesus through many of the key parts of the Easter story. And we stopped it before we've got to the end, and we'll find out a bit more about that next lesson. But we have the women who were there, who witnessed so many parts of what took place. So when Peter and the other disciples all ran away, the women were still there. At the crucifixion, when Jesus was on the cross, they were there and heard and saw all the things that happened. They were spoken to by Jesus as he was carrying the cross up the hill. And they saw where Jesus' body was placed. They were there every part of the Easter story. They were there witnessing and seeing what was going on. And when we compare that to Judas and to Peter, well, we see quite a different point of view, don't we? Whereas Judas, he decided to betray Jesus and to get him arrested. And Peter, he denied even knowing Jesus and ran away, although he was there when Jesus was on the cross. And so we've got times where those people, Judas and Peter, instead of staying close to Jesus, well, in actual fact, they were far away. But the women, they were there every single step of the way. And can you imagine what they were feeling? Can you imagine what it was that they saw and heard? This was Jesus, their beloved friend and God's Son, right in front of them, they believed. And yet all these things, these terrible things were happening. Now we're going to look at two pieces of artwork today, and we're going to be seeing how the women were represented in the artwork. I want you to look at their facial expressions and think about how they're feeling. Think about how the artist has portrayed them. Are they full of grief and anguish? Are they distraught and upset and saddened? Are they lonely? What is it that you can see in these pieces of art? Now, our first piece of artwork is called The Yellow Christ, and it's by Gauguin. And I'd love for you to have a little look at it and to see what you notice. I wonder what your thoughts are about the colours that were used, about the facial expressions of the women. What do you think they were feeling in that image? Well, let's have a look at another one. It's called The Descent from the Cross. I wonder what you thought when you saw that piece of artwork. Very different, isn't it? The way in which the women were. Did you notice Mary, the mother of Jesus? She's normally depicted in blue. It's not because she wore blue. It would be very unlikely for Mary to have ever worn blue. The reason why blue is used in artwork of Mary is because blue paint was actually made with a special gemstone inside of it called lapis lazuli. And it was the most expensive paint you could use. And so as a sign of respect and a sign of holiness, artwork that was showing a picture of Mary, well, they used the most expensive paint possible. So they used blue, which is why she's shown in blue. It's not because she actually wore blue. But you might have seen her there lying down. Well, it looks like she's fainted, doesn't it? So we've got Mary lying down there, fainted. We've got Jesus coming down from the cross, but we've got so many other women too. You can see tears, you can see the hands, how people are feeling about it. So from artwork, we can get an understanding of how the women were depicted, how they were shown to be feeling. And today we're going to be thinking about what those women were feeling as they were at the cross. Were they feeling lonely and distraught? Were they feeling saddened? What was it that they felt along the way? Have a little think and chat to the people around you. What do you think the women were feeling? So there's so many different emotions that we can get in there, isn't there? And so many ways in which we can show that. Artists show it in different ways, don't they? Not just with the way they show a face, but in the colours that they use, in the shape of the body and the form that they use as well. So today, as we think about the women in the Easter story, let us remember their importance. Number one, that they've been mentioned, that they're actually in the Bible in the first place, shows you that they're significant to the Easter story. How they were with Jesus when others ran away, when others let Jesus down, when others weren't there, the women still stayed by his side. And they were witnesses, which means they saw what went on. They saw as Jesus carried the cross and when Jesus spoke to them. They also were there when Jesus was placed on the cross and they heard the insults and the things that the other people were saying. And they were there, importantly, when they saw Jesus' body placed in a tomb and the stone rolled in front of it and it was sealed and the guards were placed in front. We're going to think even more about the significance of those women next time as we have our lesson.
In their shoes. Chat. Imagine that you are one of the women. What did you see? What did you think and feel at different parts of the story? Remember, we know that this story has a wonderfully happy ending. Do you think that the women knew that? Easter art. Create. Think about the women and their feelings. Choose a part of the Easter story and create your own artwork. How can you use colour, form and positioning to show feelings? Who's who? Think. Compare the actions and thoughts of Judas, Peter and the women at different parts of the Easter story.